The Westwood mansion gleamed under the California sun, its white stucco walls and red-tiled roof a testament to wealth and ambition. Inside, Skylar Perez moved silently through the marble corridors, her cleaning cart rattling softly with each step. At 28, with her dark curls tied back and her 6-month pregnant belly straining against her black uniform, Skylar was a shadow in the sprawling home of tech billionaire Joseph Clark. Her brown eyes, sharp and observant, flickered toward the tall windows as sunlight streamed in, illuminating dust motes she'd soon sweep away. This was her life now, polishing floors, scrubbing sinks, and staying invisible. But it hadn't always been. Skylar grew up in a small apartment in South Los Angeles, where her mother's voice filled Sunday mornings with gospel hymns. Those songs, rich with hope and resilience, had shaped Skylar's dreams. She'd spent her early 20s performing in church choirs and small jazz clubs, her voice a blend of soulful warmth and raw power, earning her a loyal following in the local gospel scene. She'd once believed she'd make it to Nashville, not as a country singer, but as a gospel and R&B artist, carrying the legacy of her mother's music. But life had other plans. Jake Miller, a charming but unreliable musician, had swept into her life, promising shared dreams of music and love. When she told him she was pregnant, he vanished, leaving her with a broken heart and a baby on the way. With no savings and no family to lean on after her mother's passing, Skylar took the only job she could find: live-in maid for Joseph Clark. The mansion was a world apart from her childhood home. Its high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and endless rooms felt like a museum, not a place where people lived. Joseph, a 40-year-old tech mogul with salt and pepper hair and kind hazel eyes, had built his fortune from nothing, creating security software that protected half the world's data. Unlike most of his elite peers, he treated his staff respectfully, often stopping to ask about their lives or offering small gestures of kindness. Skylar appreciated this, though she kept her distance. She'd learned the hard way that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Today, as she polished a mahogany banister in the East Wing, Skylar's back ached, a dull reminder of the life growing inside her. She paused, one hand resting on her belly, feeling the faint flutter of her baby's kicks. "Hang in there, little one," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "We're gonna make it." She adjusted her apron and pushed the cart forward, determined to finish her tasks before Vanessa, Joseph's fiancée, returned from her latest shopping spree. Vanessa Clark, no relation to Joseph, just an ironic coincidence, was a former model from a wealthy New York family. She ruled the mansion like a queen, with her sleek blonde hair, designer dresses, and a smile that never reached her ice blue eyes. To Vanessa, the staff consisted of furniture that only served her whims. Skylar had learned to avoid her, keeping her head down and her responses short. But Vanessa's sharp tongue found her anyway. "Skylar." Vanessa's voice cut through the quiet hallway like a blade. She stood at the far end, her arms crossed, a shopping bag dangling from one manicured hand. "This floor is filthy. I can see smudges from here. Do you even know how to clean?" Skylar's jaw tightened, but she kept her tone neutral. "I'm sorry, Miss Clark. I'll go over it again." "You'd better," Vanessa snapped, stepping closer. Her heels clicked against the marble, each sound a deliberate reminder of her power. "And stay out of my sight today. I don't need a pregnant maid waddling around ruining the aesthetic." "Yes, Miss Clark," Skylar replied, her eyes fixed on the floor. She waited until Vanessa's footsteps faded before letting out a slow breath. The words stung, but Skylar had heard worse. She'd learned to bury her pride, focusing instead on the overtime pay that would buy a crib, diapers, and maybe a future for her child. As she resumed her work, a familiar voice broke her thoughts. "Skylar, you okay?" Antonio Diaz, the mansion's head chef, stood in the doorway to the kitchen, his white uniform spotless. His warm brown eyes held concern as he wiped his hands on a towel. "I'm fine," Skylar said, forcing a smile. "Just another day with the queen bee." Antonio chuckled, but his expression sobered. "Be careful around her. I saw how she looked at you like you're a problem she wants solved." Skylar nodded, grateful for Antonio's friendship. He'd been the first to welcome her when she started working here 6 months ago, often sneaking her extra food or offering a kind word. "Thanks, Antonio. I'll watch my back." He handed her a small plate with a warm biscuit and a slice of fruit for you and the little one. "You need to eat more." Skylar took the plate, her heart softening. "You're too good to me. Someone's got to look out for you," he said with a wink before heading back to the kitchen. As Skylar ate the biscuit, she thought about Antonio's warning. Vanessa's cruelty wasn't new, but her comments had grown sharper lately, especially when Joseph was nearby. Skylar had noticed Vanessa's eyes narrow whenever Joseph spoke to her, even if it was a polite "good morning" or a question about her health. She didn't understand it. Joseph was her employer, nothing more. But Vanessa seemed to see her as a threat, which was absurd. Skylar was a maid pregnant and alone, not exactly in competition with a woman like Vanessa. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of dusting and vacuuming. The mansion was being prepared for Joseph and Vanessa's upcoming wedding, a multi-million-dollar affair with the staff working overtime. Florists, caterers, and decorators buzzed through the halls, transforming the estate into a white roses and crystal vision. Skylar stayed out of the chaos, focusing on the guest rooms in the East Wing. As she cleaned a bathroom mirror, she caught her reflection. Tired eyes, a few freckles across her brown skin, and a faint scar above her eyebrow from a childhood fall. She barely recognized herself. The girl who'd once sung by the riverside to a cheering crowd was replaced by someone who cleaned mirrors for a living. Yet as she worked, a melody slipped into her mind. It was her mother's favorite hymn, one Skylar had sung at church as a teenager. Without thinking, she began to hum the notes low and soothing. "By the riverside, I'll lay my burdens down." The sound filled the empty bathroom, wrapping around her like a warm blanket. For a moment, she wasn't a maid. She was Skylar Perez, the singer, the dreamer, the woman who'd once believed she could change the world with her voice. The sound of footsteps snapped her back to reality. Joseph stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Skylar froze, the humming dying in her throat. "I'm sorry, Mr. Clark," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize." He interrupted, his voice gentle. "That was beautiful. You have an incredible voice, Skylar." Her cheeks warmed. "Thank you, sir. I used to sing before." She gestured vaguely to her belly, unsure how to explain the life that had derailed her dreams. "You should keep singing," Joseph said, adjusting his glasses. "Talent like that deserves to be heard." Skylar managed a small smile, but Vanessa's voice echoed from the hallway before she could respond. "Joseph, the florist is here, and they've brought the wrong roses. You need to deal with this." Joseph sighed, giving Skylar an apologetic look. "Duty calls. But don't stop singing, okay?" Skylar returned to her work as he walked away, her heart a little lighter. Joseph's kindness was a rare bright spot in her days, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa had overheard their exchange. The thought sent a chill through her. Whatever Vanessa was planning for this wedding, Skylar knew she'd need to stay on guard. The mansion might be beautiful, but it was also a battlefield, and she was determined to survive for herself and her baby. Westwood Manor basked in the sunset glow, with golden-orange rays slipping through silk curtains shimmering on the marble floor. Skylar Perez pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway, each step slow and deliberate to avoid making noise. Her stomach felt heavy, every movement accompanied by a sharp pain in her back, but she clenched her lips and pressed on with her work. Only a few days remained until Joseph Clark and Vanessa's $1 million wedding, and the atmosphere in the house was taut as a bowstring. Skylar knew that a single mistake would not escape Vanessa's scrutiny. The aroma of freshly baked bread and herbs filled the air in the kitchen. Antonio, the head chef, was chopping vegetables with practiced precision. He looked up when he saw Skylar, his warm smile easing her fatigue. "Skylar, take a break. I made you some tomato soup with a touch of cream for the little one." He slid a steaming bowl toward her, his voice brimming with care. "Thank you, Antonio," Skylar replied, settling onto a wooden chair in the corner of the kitchen. The warmth from the bowl spread through her hands, a reminder that kindness still existed in this world. "You always look out for me like a brother." Antonio shrugged, but his eyes grew serious. "I saw how Vanessa looked at you this morning, Skylar, like you're a thorn in her side. Be careful she's not the type to talk." Skylar nodded, a sense of unease creeping into her heart. She was used to Vanessa's coldness, but her barbs had grown sharper lately, especially when Joseph was nearby. Skylar didn't understand why. She was just a pregnant maid, struggling through each day, no match for someone like Vanessa, who always dazzled in designer dresses and a perfect smile. She was spooning up some soup when Joseph entered the kitchen, his white shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed from a long day of meetings. He paused when he saw Skylar, his gaze as gentle as ever. "Skylar, are you okay? I've seen you working all day without a break." His voice was warm with genuine concern, making her heart stir faintly. "I'm fine, Mr. Clark," Skylar replied, lowering her eyes to hide her slight embarrassment. "I'm getting everything done before the wedding starts." Joseph frowned, stepping closer. "You need to rest. The baby needs a healthy mom." He sat across from her, a surprising gesture that made Antonio glance over curiously. "Have you ever thought about going back to music? After hearing you sing yesterday, I can't get that voice out of my head. It's special." Skylar shook her head, a sad smile flickering across her face. "Music's in the past, sir. Right now I need to take care of my baby." But deep inside the notes of the hymn, by the riverside, still echoed a reminder of dreams long buried. Joseph looked at her, his eyes seeming to hold something more profound, but he only nodded. "I understand. But if you change your mind, let me know. I have friends in the music industry who could help." He stood to leave, but Vanessa appeared at the kitchen door. "Joseph." Her voice cut through the warmth like a knife. She stood there, her emerald silk dress clinging to her frame, golden hair gleaming under the light. "What are you doing here? Please review the guest list right now." Her eyes flicked to Skylar, cold and calculating. "And you, Skylar, aren't you supposed to be working? The kitchen isn't a place for lounging and eating." Skylar stood abruptly, the bowl of soup still mostly full. "I'm sorry, Miss Clark. I'll get back to work." She pushed the cleaning cart out, her heart pounding. Vanessa wasn't just irritated, there was something cruel in the way she looked at her, like a cat stalking a mouse. As Skylar disappeared around the corner, Vanessa turned to Joseph, her voice syrupy but calculated. "You're awfully attentive to her, Joseph. What would people think if they saw you chatting so closely with a maid?" Joseph's brow furrowed, his tone calm but firm. "I'm just making sure my staff is okay. She's pregnant, Vanessa. A little kindness doesn't hurt anyone." Vanessa smiled, but her eyes were icy. "Of course, darling. I want everything to be perfect for our wedding. You know, no room for unnecessary distractions." She turned on her heel, leaving Joseph with an unshakable sense of unease. Meanwhile, Skylar continued cleaning the guest rooms, trying to shake off Vanessa's words. She opened a door leading to the back garden, where white roses prepared for the wedding bloomed vibrantly. The cool air soothed her. She sat on a stone bench, gently rubbing her belly, feeling the faint heartbeat of her unborn child. You'll be my light. Lily, she whispered, naming her baby. No matter how harsh the world gets, I'll protect you. She closed her eyes, letting old melodies rise in her mind. By the riverside played in her head, each lyric like a prayer, carrying memories of Sunday mornings with her mother, when the small church in South Los Angeles resonated with the congregation's voices. Skylar began to sing softly, her voice gentle but powerful, like a river flowing through pain. By the riverside, I'll lay my burdens down. Unbeknownst to her, Joseph stood at the garden's edge, having walked out from the main house. He stopped, captivated by her voice, each note touching something deep within him. It reminded him of his own early days, fighting for dreams that seemed impossible. Something about Skylar, her resilience, vulnerability, and buried talent, made him want to help her, not just out of kindness, but from a connection he couldn't yet name. The moment was shattered when Vanessa appeared, her voice sharp. Skylar, what are you doing out here? I told you to clean the guest rooms before the guests arrive. Skylar was startled and stood quickly, her apology barely audible. I'm sorry, Miss Clark. I'll do it now. Vanessa crossed her arms, her gaze cutting. You should know your place, Skylar. Please don't make me remind you again. She glanced at Joseph as if asserting her dominance. Joseph opened his mouth to speak, but Skylar hurriedly pushed her cart back inside, not wanting to cause more trouble. Once Skylar was gone, Joseph turned to Vanessa, his voice low but resolute. Vanessa was taking a moment. She's pregnant, not a machine. Vanessa smiled, but it didn't mask the jealousy simmering within her. Of course, darling. I want everything perfect for our big day. You understand, don't you? But in her eyes, a malicious plan was taking shape, turning the wedding into a stage for humiliation. Skylar, meanwhile, resumed her work, her heart heavy. She knew Vanessa was targeting her, but she could do nothing but carry on. She rubbed her belly, whispering to Lily, "Just a few more days, my love. I'll be strong for you." But deep inside, she sensed a storm brewing, and she only hoped she had the strength to weather it. The Westwood mansion hummed with the chaos of wedding preparations, its halls alive with the clatter of silverware and the rustle of white roses being arranged in towering vases. Skylar Perez navigated the frenzy with her cleaning cart, her movements deliberate, her eyes scanning for Vanessa's presence. The air felt thick with expectation, as if the house knew a storm was brewing. Skylar's belly, heavy with her unborn child, ached with every step, but she pressed on, driven by the promise of overtime pay that would secure a future for her baby, whom she'd already named Lily. The weight of Vanessa's cruel words lingered, a sharp reminder that her place in this world was precarious, defined by her uniform and her silence. Skylar paused to catch her breath in the library's quiet, a sanctuary of leather-bound books and polished oak. The room was untouched by the wedding chaos, and its stillness was a rare comfort. She ran a cloth over a bookshelf, her fingers brushing the spine of a biography about a jazz legend her mother had admired. The memory stirred something deep within her, a longing for the stage, and nights when her voice had carried hope to strangers. Without realizing it, she began to hum, "By the Riverside," the gospel hymn that had been her mother's anthem. The notes grew into a soft song, her voice weaving through the air, rich and soulful, each word a prayer for strength. "By the riverside, I'll lay my burdens down." She didn't hear the door creak open. Joseph Clark stood in the doorway, his presence unassuming, his tie loosened after a long call with investors. He froze, captivated by the melody that filled the room. Skylar's voice wasn't just beautiful. It was alive, carrying a weight of sorrow and resilience that made his chest tighten. He leaned against the doorframe, not wanting to interrupt his usual composure, softened by the raw emotion in her song. The silence felt sacred when she finished, and he clapped softly, startling her. Skylar. That was. Joseph searched for the right word stepping into the room. Extraordinary. Where did you learn to sing like that? Skylar's cheeks flushed, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. It's just something I used to do, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's not important now. It is essential. Joseph insisted, his eyes earnest behind his glasses. You have a gift. You shouldn't hide it. He hesitated, as if weighing his following words. I meant what I said about knowing people in the music industry. If you ever want to try again, I could. Thank you. Mr. Clark. Skylar cut in, her tone polite, but firm. But I can't afford dreams right now. I have a baby to think about. She turned back to the bookshelf, her cloth moving in quick practice strokes, signaling the end of the conversation. Joseph nodded, respecting her boundary, but her voice lingered in his mind as he left the room. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd glimpsed something rare, something the world deserved to hear. But as he stepped into the hallway, Vanessa's voice sliced through his thoughts. Joseph, there you are. She stood at the far end, her designer dress shimmering under the chandelier light, her smile practiced but sharp. The caterer is completely incompetent. You need to handle this now. I'm coming, Joseph replied, his tone measured. But as he walked toward her, he caught the way her eyes darted toward the library door, where Skylar was still working. There was a glint in her gaze, something calculated, dangerous. He brushed it off, telling himself it was just wedding stress, but a knot of unease settled in his stomach. Even after she'd gone, Skylar felt the weight of Vanessa's presence inside the library. The air seemed colder, heavier. Trying to focus, she moved to the next shelf, but her thoughts drifted to Antonio's warning about Vanessa's intentions. She didn't trust the woman, not after the venom in her words, the way she seemed to relish Skylar's invisibility. Yet there was a part of her, a small stubborn spark, that refused to be crushed. She thought of Lily, the life she wanted to build for her daughter, where dreams weren't buried under duty. As the day wore on, the mansion grew busier. Florists rushed in with fresh bouquets, arms full of white roses that Vanessa had deemed the only acceptable flower. Skylar overheard snippets of conversation as she cleaned Vanessa, barking orders at the wedding planner Julia, who scurried about with a clipboard, her face etched with stress. No, Julia, the tablecloths are ivory, not cream. Do you want to ruin everything? Vanessa's voice carried through the dining room, sharp enough to make Skylar wince. She was wiping down a chandelier when Antonio found her, his chef's apron dusted with flour. Skylar, you look exhausted, he said, his voice low to avoid being overheard. You shouldn't be climbing ladders in your condition. I'm fine, Skylar replied, though her back screamed in protest. The extra hours mean I can afford a stroller, maybe even a car seat. Antonio shook his head, his expression a mix of admiration and worry. You're stronger than anyone I know. But listen, Vanessa was in the kitchen earlier, whispering with her bridesmaids. They were talking about a special surprise for the wedding. They kept looking toward the staff quarters. I don't like it. Skylar's heart sank. What kind of surprise, I don't know, Antonio admitted. But it's Vanessa. Nothing she plans is suitable for people like us. He paused, then added, Keep your guard up, okay? You and Lily deserve better than whatever she's scheming. Skylar knotted her throat tight. She wanted to believe it was nothing, that Vanessa's cruelty was just petty spite. But the memory of that cold, calculating look in Vanessa's eyes told her otherwise. She returned to her work, her hands trembling slightly as she polished the chandelier's crystals, each catching the light like a tiny prison. Later that evening, As the staff prepared for a pre-wedding dinner, Skylar helped set tables in the grand dining room. The room was opulent with gold-rimmed plates and candles flickering in silver holders. She crept her uniform starkly, contrasting the elegance around her. As she adjusted a napkin, she felt a gentle kick from Lily, a reminder of why she endured this. "We're almost there, baby," she whispered, her voice a soft vow. From across the room, Joseph watched her unnoticed. He'd come to check on the dinner preparations, but found himself drawn to Skylar's quiet strength. Something about her, her resilience, her grace under pressure, stirred a protective instinct in him. He thought of Vanessa's sharp words, her obsession with perfection, and felt a pang of doubt about the life he was about to enter. Was this really what he wanted? A marriage built on appearances, not heart. Before he could dwell on it, Vanessa swept into the room, her presence commanding attention. "Skylar, these napkins are wrinkled," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Fix them. Now." Skylar nodded, her face a mask of compliance, but inside a fire flickered. She thought of her mother's hymn of the riverside where burdens were laid down. She wouldn't let Vanessa break her. Not now, not ever. As she smoothed the napkins, her fingers steady, she felt Lily kick again, urging her to hold on. The wedding was coming, a test she couldn't yet name. But Skylar knew one thing: she would face it with the strength of her mother's song in her heart. The Brentwood Country Club shimmered under a canopy of twinkling lights. Its grand ballroom transformed into a vision of extravagance for Joseph Clark and Vanessa's wedding. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in silk, each adorned with towering arrangements of white roses. Skylar Perez moved through the chaos of final preparations, her cleaning cart replaced by a tray of champagne flutes. She balanced carefully, her pregnant belly making each step a calculated effort. The air buzzed with anticipation, but beneath the opulence unease ran through her. Vanessa's words, cold glances, and Antonio's warnings echoed in her mind, a drumbeat of caution she couldn't ignore. Skylar set the tray on a side table, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted a glass. The day's weight pressed against her chest, not just from the physical strain, but from a growing sense that something was wrong. She caught sight of Vanessa across the room, radiant in a sleek silver dress, her smile a perfect mask as she greeted early guests. To the world, she was the flawless bride-to-be, but Skylar knew the venom that lurked beneath. She turned away, focusing on her tasks, determined to stay invisible until the night was over. In the kitchen, Antonio was a whirlwind, directing caterers with the precision of a conductor. He spotted Skylar and waved her over, his face etched with concern. He said, "You're carrying too much," taking the tray from her hands. "Sit for a minute. You look like you're about to collapse." "I can't," Skylar replied, rubbing her lower back. "There's too much to do, and I need the hours." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the exhaustion she fought to hide. Lily's future depended on these moments, on every dollar she earned. Antonio shook his head, his voice low. "I overheard Vanessa talking to Julia, the wedding planner. They were whispering about a backup singer for the first dance. They mentioned your name, Skylar. It didn't sound like a favor." His words landed like a stone in her stomach, confirming her fears. Before she could respond, Vanessa's voice cut through the kitchen's clamor. "Skylar." She stood in the doorway, her posture regal, her eyes glinting with something unreadable. "I need to speak with you. Now." Skylar followed her to a quiet alcove off the main hall, her heart pounding. Vanessa's smile was syrupy, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I heard some unfortunate news." She began, her tone laced with false sympathy. "Our wedding singer has laryngitis. Can you believe it? 2 days before the big day." She paused, studying Skylar like a predator sizing up its prey. "But then I remembered what Joseph said about your voice. You used to sing, didn't you?" Skylar's throat tightened. "Yes, but it's been a long time. I'm not sure. Oh, don't be modest. Vanessa interrupted, her smile widening. It would mean so much to Joseph if you could help us out. Just one song for our first dance, a simple ballad. The band knows it, and I'm sure you could manage. She pulled a folded paper from her clutch, holding it out. Here are the lyrics, just in case we can't find a replacement. Skylar took the paper, her fingers brushing against the crisp edges. The gesture felt like a trap, but she couldn't pinpoint why. I don't know, Miss Clark, she said, her voice wavering. I haven't performed in years, and with the baby. Vanessa's expression hardened for a split second, before softening again. Joseph has been so kind to you, hasn't he? Adjusting your hours and giving you extra pay would be a way to thank him. Don't you think? Her words were a velvet glove over a steel fist, pressing Skylar into a corner. I'll think about it, Skylar said, clutching the lyrics. Vanessa's smile returned triumphant as she turned and glided back to the ballroom, leaving Skylar alone with her racing thoughts. She unfolded the paper, scanning the words to a song she'd never heard, a complex ballad with soaring notes that would challenge a seasoned performer. Her stomach churned. This wasn't an opportunity. It was a setup. Back in the kitchen, Skylar showed the lyrics to Antonio, her voice barely above a whisper. She wants me to sing this, but it feels wrong. Why me? Why now? Antonio's eyes darkened as he read the sheet. This song is a nightmare. High notes, tricky phrasing. She's setting you up to fail, Skylar. I'd bet my chef's knife she planned this from the moment she heard you sing. He handed the paper back, his jaw tight. Please don't do it. Tell her you're sick or something. But Skylar hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the paper. Joseph's kindness flashed through her mind, his gentle encouragement, the way he'd listened to her in the library, his belief in her voice. She owed him, didn't she? And a small defiant part of her, the part that still dreamed of stages and spotlights, whispered that this could be a chance to reclaim a piece of herself. I don't know, she murmured. Maybe I could do it, just one song. Antonio grabbed her shoulders gently, his eyes fierce. Skylar, listen to me. Vanessa doesn't do favors. Whatever she's planning, it's to hurt you. You and Lily deserve better than her games. Skylar nodded, but her heart was torn. She tucked the lyrics into her apron pocket and returned to her tasks, her mind a storm of doubt and determination. As she carried a tray of glasses to the reception area, she caught sight of Joseph near the ballroom entrance, speaking with a group of suited men. He looked tired, his shoulders tense as if the weight of the wedding was more than he'd bargained for. When he noticed her, his face softened, and he excused himself to approach. Skylar, you're working too hard, he said, his voice low and concerned. You should take a break. The staff can handle things for a while. I'm okay, Mr. Clark, she replied, her gaze dropping to the floor. She wanted to tell him about Vanessa's request to ask if he knew, but the words stuck in her throat. What if he thought she was overstepping? What if he didn't believe her? Joseph studied her, sensing her unease. Is something wrong? He asked, stepping closer. You can tell me. For a moment, Skylar almost spoke. But then Vanessa's voice rang out, calling Joseph back to greet more guests. He gave Skylar an apologetic smile before turning away, leaving her with the lyrics burning a hole in her pocket. She watched him go, her heart aching with gratitude and fear. Joseph's kindness was a lifeline, but Vanessa's cruelty was a shadow she couldn't escape. Skylar overheard Vanessa speaking with Julia in a hushed corner as the evening continued. Everything's set, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. It'll be unforgettable. Julia's response was too soft to hear, but her troubled expression sent a chill through Skylar. She clutched the tray tighter, her knuckles whitening. Whatever Vanessa had planned, it was coming, and Skylar felt like a lamb led to slaughter. Yet deep within her, the melody of By the Riverside stirred a quiet promise that she could face whatever lay ahead. For Lily, for herself, She would find a way to stand tall. The Brentwood Country Club's ballroom pulsed with the energy of 300 guests, their laughter and clinking glasses, a symphony of wealth and celebration. The wedding of Joseph Clark and Vanessa was in full swing, the air thick with the scent of roses and champagne. Skylar Perez stood at the edge of the chaos, her black uniform contrasting with the glittering gowns around her. Her tray of appetizers trembled in her hands, not from the weight, but from the dread pooling in her chest. The folded lyrics Vanessa had given her sat heavy in her apron pocket, a silent warning of the trap she sensed, but couldn't fully grasp. Her belly round with her unborn daughter Lily ached with every step, but she moved with purpose, determined to survive the night. The band played a soft jazz tune, setting the stage for the first dance, but the atmosphere shifted when Julia, the wedding planner, rushed across the room, her face pale. Skylar caught snippets of her urgent whispers to Vanessa near the hid table. "The singer. She's not coming. Confirmed it's laryngitis." Vanessa's lips curled into a smile, shivering down Skylar's spine. She watched as Vanessa scanned the crowd, her eyes locking onto Skylar with a predatory glint. Before Skylar could retreat, Vanessa glided toward her, her white gown trailing like a queen's mantle. "Skylar, darling." Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false warmth as she placed a hand on Skylar's arm. "We have a crisis. The singer for our first dance is out, and we need you to step in. You can do it, can't you? For Joseph?" Her words were a velvet cage, each syllable tightening the bars around Skylar. Skylar's heart raced, her fingers brushing the lyrics in her pocket. I don't think I'm prepared, Miss Clark. I haven't sung in front of people in so long." Her voice wavered, but her eyes held steady, searching Vanessa's face for the truth. "Nonsense," Vanessa said, her smile unwavering. "Joseph told me how much he loved your voice. This is your chance to shine. The band has the music and you have the lyrics. It's just one song." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't disappoint him." Skylar glanced across the room, where Joseph stood, greeting a guest, his expression distracted. She thought of his kindness, his belief in her, and felt a pang of obligation. But Antonio's warning echoed in her mind. Vanessa's plan wasn't about helping her. It was about breaking her. Still, a flicker of defiance sparked within her. If Vanessa wanted a spectacle, Skylar would give her one on her own terms. "All right," Skylar said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'll do it." Vanessa's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Wonderful. Julia will take you to the stage. You have 5 minutes to prepare." She turned away, her gown sweeping the floor, leaving Skylar with a sinking feeling that she'd just stepped into a lion's den. Julia appeared at Skylar's side, her expression fraught with guilt. "Come with me," she said softly, leading Skylar through a back corridor to the stage. The band was already there, their instruments gleaming under the spotlights, but their faces showed confusion as they shuffled through sheet music. Skylar unfolded the lyrics, her eyes scanning the complex ballad Vanessa had chosen, a song designed to trip her up with notes that soared beyond her rusty vocal range. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't just a performance. It was a public execution. "Miss, what's the song?" the band leader asked, his brow furrowed. "We weren't told about a new singer." Skylar took a deep breath, her decision crystallizing. "I'm not singing that," she said, crumpling the paper. "I'll sing something else. By the Riverside. It's a gospel hymn, slow and simple. Can you give me a 4-beat rhythm and a soft piano to start?" The band leader hesitated, then nodded. "We can make it work." He relayed the instructions to the musicians, who adjusted their setup with quick, practiced movements. Skylar stood at the edge of the stage, her heart pounding, as the reality of what she was about to do sank in. She was still in her maid's uniform, her pregnant belly unmistakable, about to face a crowd of strangers who saw her as nothing more than the help. Before she could step forward, Vanessa's voice boomed through the microphone, silencing the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her tone dripping with mockery, "we have a special treat tonight. Our maid Skylar Perez thinks she can entertain us with a song. Isn't that charming?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, some guests exchanging amused glances, others whispering behind their hands. Skylar felt the blood drain from her face, her legs trembling under the weight of their judgment. Julia's hand grazed her arm, her voice a whisper. "I'm so sorry." I tried to stop her, but Skylar barely heard her. The stage lights burned bright, blinding her to all but the sea of faces waiting for her to fail. She spotted Antonio near the kitchen door, his eyes wide with worry, and Margaret Joseph's mother seated at a table, her expression troubled. Joseph stood at the back, his face a mask of confusion, as he looked between Vanessa and Skylar. Vanessa handed Skylar the microphone, leaning in to whisper, "Don't make a fool of yourself." Then she stepped back, joining Joseph, who frowned, his gaze shifting to Skylar with growing concern. Skylar stood alone, the microphone heavy in her hand, the moment's weight threatening to crush her. Whispers floated from the crowd. "The maid? Really? This must be a joke." Her worst fears materialized, public humiliation laid bare for the elite to dissect. But then she thought of Lily, of the strength she'd need to be a mother, of the him that had carried her mother through hardship. She closed her eyes, blocking the crowd, and nodded to the band leader. The piano began soft and steady, followed by a gentle drumbeat. Skylar opened her mouth, and her voice poured out pure and potent. "By the riverside, I'll lay my burdens down." The room fell silent, the mocking whispers dying as her song filled the space. Each note carried her pain, her lost dreams, abandonment, struggle, and hope, woven into the gospel hymn's timeless promise. The band joined in their instruments, blending seamlessly, amplifying the emotion in her voice. Skylar's eyes opened, and she saw the crowd transform. Faces softened. Some guests leaned forward. Others closed their eyes, letting her music wash over them. Joseph stood frozen, his breath catching as Skylar's voice reached him. It wasn't just her talent, her courage, her refusal to be diminished. Vanessa's smile faltered, her hands clenching as her plan unraveled. This was supposed to be Skylar's downfall, not her triumph. As Skylar sang the final notes, her voice soaring with a strength she hadn't felt in years, the room erupted in applause. Guests stood clapping with genuine awe, some wiping tears. Skylar stood still, stunned by the response. For a moment, she was no longer the maid. She was the singer she'd always been meant to be. But Vanessa's voice cut through the applause, sharp and venomous. "Wasn't that quaint?" she said into the microphone, forcing a laugh. "Now let's move on to the first dance." The crowd's mood shifted, discomfort rippling through the room at her cruelty. Joseph stepped forward, his expression darkening. "Vanessa," he said, his voice low but firm. "That's enough." Skylar's heart pounded as she stepped back, the applause still ringing in her ears. But Vanessa's words were a fresh wound. She didn't see Joseph's next move, but she felt the shift in the air. A reckoning was coming, and she was at its center. The Brentwood Country Club's ballroom hung tensely, the echoes of Skylar Perez's soulful performance reverberating through the gilded space. The applause had faded, replaced by an uneasy murmur as Vanessa's cutting words, "Wasn't that quaint?" lingered in the air like a poison. Skylar stood at the edge of the stage, her maid's uniform stark under the harsh spotlights, her hands trembling around the microphone she clutched. Her heart pounded, not from the triumph of her song, but from the sting of Vanessa's mockery, which had turned her moment of courage into a spectacle of disdain. The guests' eyes darted between her and Vanessa, some whispering, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Joseph Clark stood at the back of the room, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed on Vanessa. The woman he'd promised to marry stood poised at the center of the ballroom, her white gown a beacon of elegance, but her words had revealed a cruelty he could no longer ignore. Schuyler's voice, raw, powerful, and achingly honest, had shaken something loose, a truth he'd buried under the pressure of expectations. He stepped forward, his heart a storm of anger and clarity. Before he could speak, Antonio, the head chef, pushed through the crowd, his phone raised high. A fierce determination replaced his usually warm demeanor. "Everyone, you need to hear this," he announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. The room stilled as he pressed play, and Vanessa's voice spilled from the speaker, sharp and unmistakable. "I can't wait to see that maid make a fool of herself. I told the band to play something impossible. It'll show her where she belongs." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged shocked glances, their whispers growing louder. Vanessa's face drained of color, her perfect composure cracking like thin ice. That's not what it sounds like," she stammered, snatching at the phone, but Antonio stepped back, holding it out of reach. "I recorded this in the kitchen this morning," he said, his voice steady. "You planned to humiliate Schuyler. You wanted her to fail." Schuyler's breath caught her eyes wide as the truth unfolded. The lyrics Vanessa had given her, the sudden emergency with the singer, the mocking introduction, it was all a calculated trap. She felt exposed, raw, but the crowd's reaction shifted something in her. Some guests glared at Vanessa. Others murmured in support of Schuyler, their earlier amusement replaced by sympathy. Margaret, Joseph's mother, rose from her seat, her expression a mix of disappointment and resolve as she looked at her soon-to-be daughter-in-law. Joseph moved toward the stage, his steps deliberate, his eyes never leaving Vanessa. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice low, but carrying a weight that silenced the room. Vanessa's hands shook as she clutched her gown, her smile gone. "Joseph, it's a misunderstanding. You can't believe a chef over me." But Joseph's gaze hardened. He turned to Schuyler, still frozen, her vulnerability bare before the elite crowd. "Schuyler," he said softly, climbing onto the stage, "are you all right?" His concern was genuine, his presence a shield against the chaos. I don't know," Schuyler whispered, her voice breaking. She wanted to run to escape the hundreds of eyes judging her, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. Lily kicked inside her, reminding her why she'd endured this night, and sung despite the trap. Vanessa's voice rose shrill and desperate. "Joseph, this is our wedding. You're making a scene over her." She gestured at Schuyler, her tone dripping with scorn. "She's nobody." "That's enough," Joseph said, his voice like steel. He faced the crowd, his shoulders squared. "This wedding is over." The words landed like a thunderclap, gasps echoing through the ballroom. Vanessa's eyes widened, her hands flying to her mouth. "You can't mean that," she whispered, tears welling, but her performance felt hollow. Joseph removed his wedding ring, the simple gold band glinting as he set it on the stage. "I've ignored too many signs," he said, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. "This isn't about Schuyler. It's about you, Vanessa, and who you've shown yourself to be." He turned to the crowd. "I apologize to everyone here. The reception is canceled. Please go home." The room erupted in chaos, guests murmuring, some gathering their belongings, others lingering to watch the drama unfold. Vanessa's parents rushed to her side, her mother whispering frantically, her father demanding Joseph reconsider. But Joseph ignored them, focusing on Skylar. "You don't deserve this," he said quietly, helping her step down from the stage. "I'm so sorry." Skylar's throat tightened, tears threatening to spill. "I just wanted to help," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to ruin everything." Joseph assured her, "You didn't ruin anything," his hand steady on her arm. "You showed courage up there. Your voice, it changed everything." From the edge of the room, Antonio approached, his phone still in hand. "I've got your back, Skylar," he said, his eyes fiercely loyal. "That recording's already spreading. She won't get away with this." Margaret joined them, her presence calm but resolute. She said, "Skylar, dear, you were magnificent taking Skylar's hand. And you," Joseph made the right choice. She glanced at Vanessa now, surrounded by her bridesmaids, her perfect facade crumbling as she sobbed theatrically. Skylar felt overwhelmed, the weight of the night pressing down on her. She'd faced humiliation, triumphed with her song, and now stood at the center of a shattered wedding. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I can't go back to the mansion, not after this." Joseph met her gaze, his expression resolute. "You don't have to. I have a guest house on the property separate from the main house. You can stay there until you figure things out. You and Lily deserve a safe place." Skylar shook her head, her pride warring with her exhaustion. "I can't accept that. It's too much. It's not charity," Joseph said firmly. "It's the least I can do after tonight." And he hesitated, a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. "I heard your voice, Skylar. It's not just talent, it's power. I know people who could help you share it with the world if you let me." Skylar's heart ached with a mix of gratitude and fear. She thought of Lily, of the future she wanted to build, and felt a spark of hope she hadn't dared to entertain in months. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. Joseph replied, saying, "You'll think about it," his smile gentle but unwavering. "For now, let's get you out of here." As they moved toward the exit, Vanessa's voice rang out, desperate and shrill. "Joseph, you're choosing her over me, a maid." Her words were a final stab, but Joseph didn't turn back. He guided Skylar through the crowd, Antonio and Margaret close behind, their presence a quiet strength. Outside, the cool night air hit Skylar like a bomb. She clutched her belly, feeling Lily's steady kicks, and let a single tear fall. The wedding had been a battlefield, but she'd survived. Her voice had carried her through, and for the first time, she believed it might take her further toward a future she could only begin to imagine. The guest house behind Joseph Clark's Westwood mansion was a haven of quiet, its Spanish-style arches and ivy-covered walls starkly contrasting the opulent chaos of the main estate. Skylar Perez stood in the small living room, her few belongings neatly arranged on a wooden dresser by Antonio's careful hands. The space was modest but warm, with large windows letting in soft morning light, and a patio overlooking a garden of blooming jasmine. Her fingers brushed the edge of a plush sofa, the texture foreign after months of hard chairs in the staff quarters. Her belly heavy with Lily pressed against her simple cotton dress, a reminder of the life she was building step by uncertain step. The events of the wedding night still lingered like a fever dream. The crowd's applause, Vanessa's venomous words, the recording that exposed her cruelty, and Joseph's decisive end to the marriage. Skylar's heart was a tangle of relief and fear. She'd survived Vanessa's trap, but at what cost? Her job, home in the mansion, and sense of safety are all gone in a single night. Yet Joseph's offer of the guest house and his promise to connect her with music industry contacts sparked a fragile hope she hadn't dared to feel in months. She sank onto the sofa, her hands resting protectively on her belly. "Lily," she whispered. "What are we doing?" Her voice thick with emotion. "This place, this chance, it feels too big." The baby kicked a small but fierce reassurance, and Skylar smiled through a shimmer of tears. She thought of her mother's gospel hymns, the way they'd carried her through dark days. Maybe this was her riverside, a place to lay down her burdens and start anew. A knock at the door startled her. Joseph stood there holding a tray with coffee and a plate of pastries, his casual sweater a far cry from the tuxedo he'd worn at the wedding. "Good morning," he said, his smile tentative but warm. "You might need breakfast. May I come in?" Skylar nodded, standing to take the tray. "Thank you, Mr. Clark. You didn't have to do this." Her voice was soft, adjusting to this new dynamic where she was no longer just his employee. "Call me Joseph," he said, stepping inside. "And I wanted to. You've been through a lot." He set the tray on a small table, his gaze lingering on her. "How are you feeling?" "Overwhelmed," Skylar admitted, sitting again. "I keep waiting for the catch. No one gives you a place like this without expecting something." Her words hung heavy, born of years of disappointment, but Joseph's expression didn't falter. "There's no catch," he said firmly. "You deserve a safe place, Skylar. You and Lily. And—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I meant what I said about your voice. I've already reached out to a producer friend, Sam Jackson. He's interested in hearing you sing." Skylar's breath caught. The idea of singing again, of stepping back into the world she'd left behind, was both thrilling and terrifying. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. "I haven't performed in so long, and with the baby coming." Joseph sat across from her, his eyes steady. "You don't have to decide now. Just meet Sam. Sing for him. See where it takes you." His voice held a quiet conviction, as if he saw something in her she couldn't yet see in herself. Before she could respond, Antonio arrived carrying a bag of groceries. "I stocked your fridge," he said, setting the bag on the counter. "And I brought some of my famous empanadas. You need to eat for that little one." His grin was infectious, easing the tension in the room. "Thank you, Antonio," Skylar said, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You're both too kind." Antonio waved off her thanks, but his expression grew serious. "The recording from last night is everywhere. Guests are sharing it online and calling Vanessa out. She's leaving for New York tomorrow or so, I heard. Good riddance." Skylar nodded, relief mingling with unease. Vanessa's departure was a victory, but the fallout of the wedding left her exposed, her name now tied to a scandal she hadn't chosen. "What are people saying?" she asked, dreading the answer. "Most are on your side," Joseph said. "They heard your voice, Skylar. They saw what she tried to do. It's not about the drama, it's about you." His words were a lifeline, but Skylar still felt the weight of judgment from a world that rarely saw her as more than a maid. Margaret, Joseph's mother, arrived soon after, her presence calming. She carried a small gift bag, her smile gentle as she handed it to Skylar. "She said some essentials for you and the baby. A blanket, some tea for stress. You're stronger than you know, dear." Skylar opened the bag, her fingers brushing the soft fabric of a knitted blanket. "I don't know how to thank you all," she said, her voice breaking. "I've never had people believe in me like this." Margaret took her hand, her grip firm. "You don't need to thank us. You showed the world who you are last night. That's enough." The conversation shifted to practicalities. Joseph explained the guest house was hers for as long as she needed, and he'd arranged a small stipend to cover expenses until she found her footing. But it was his next offer that stopped her heart. "Sam wants to meet you tomorrow," he said. "He's bringing a portable recording setup. You could sing By the Riverside again or something new. Whatever feels right." Skylar's pulse quickened. The thought of recording, of stepping back into music, was a dream she'd buried long ago. But with Lily due in weeks, the stakes felt impossibly high. "What if I fail?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I'm not good enough? Joseph leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. You were good enough to silence a room of 300 people last night. You're more than good enough, Skylar. You need a chance to prove it. His words stirred something deep within her, a spark of courage, a memory of her mother's voice singing through hardship. She nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. Okay, I'll meet him. As Joseph and the others left, Skylar stood alone in the guest house, the silence wrapping around her like a promise. She walked to the patio, the jasmine's sweet scent filling her lungs. She thought of Lily, of the music that had carried her through the darkest nights, and felt a surge of determination. Vanessa had tried to break her, but she'd failed. Skylar's voice had been her shield. Now it might be her path forward. She hummed softly, the notes of By the Riverside rising once more. The melody was a vow to herself, Lily, and the future she'd fight for. The guest house was a new beginning, but the road ahead was uncertain. Skylar knew one thing: as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the garden, she was ready to face whatever came next with her voice as her guide. The guest house's living room glowed softly under the afternoon sun, its walls now adorned with soundproofing panels Joseph had installed for Skylar Perez's makeshift recording studio. A microphone stood in the corner, its stand a quiet promise of dreams rekindled. Skylar sat on a stool, her hands resting on her swollen belly, feeling Lily's gentle kicks as she prepared to meet Sam Jackson. The music producer Joseph had promised would hear her sing. The air was thick with possibility and a gnawing fear. What if this chance slipped through her fingers like so many before? Her simple cotton dress clung to her, a reminder of her vulnerability. Yet her heart thrummed with a determination to seize this moment. The events of the wedding had shifted something fundamental in Skylar. The crowd's applause, Joseph's unwavering support, and the exposure of Vanessa's cruelty had cracked open a door she'd thought long closed. But the weight of her past years of struggle, abandonment, and silenced dreams still pressed against her whispering doubts. She hummed a few notes of By the Riverside, the gospel hymn that had become her anchor, grounding her as she waited for Sam's arrival. Joseph knocked softly before entering, carrying a glass of water and a notebook. Sam's on his way, he said, his voice warm but tinged with excitement. He's bringing a guitarist to accompany you. You should jot down some ideas for the session. He set the notebook on the table, his eyes searching hers for signs of hesitation. Skylar took the water, her fingers brushing his, briefly sending a spark through her. I'm nervous, she admitted, her voice soft but honest. What if he doesn't like my voice? What if I'm not what he's looking for? Joseph sat across from her, his presence steadying. He'll love your voice. I heard it, Skylar. The whole room did. You have something rare, a story in every note. His words were earnest, but there was something deeper in his gaze, a quiet intensity that made her heart skip. She looked away, afraid of the feelings stirring within her, feelings she wasn't ready to name. Before she could respond, the doorbell chimed, and Sam Jackson stepped inside, a tall man with gray dreadlocks and a warm smile that put Skylar at ease. He carried a guitar case and a small recording device, his energy vibrant yet professional. Skylar, it's a pleasure, he said, shaking her hand. Joseph sent me a clip of your performance at the wedding. That voice raw, honest, powerful. Let's see what we can do with it. Skylar's nerves eased slightly, but her hands trembled as she stood before the microphone. Sam set up the equipment, and the guitarist, a quiet woman named Lisa, tuned her instrument. Let's start with By the Riverside, Sam suggested. Then something original, if you're up for it. Skylar nodded, closing her eyes as the guitarist strummed a soft chord. Her voice rose steady at first, then soaring, filling the room with the hymn's timeless hope. Each note carried her journey, her losses, resilience, and love for Lily. When she finished, Sam's eyes were wide, his smile broad. "That's it," he said, clapping. "That's the kind of soul the world needs to hear. Let's record it properly." For hours they worked, laying down tracks, refining the arrangement. Skylar felt alive, her voice bridging a past she'd thought lost. Joseph watched from the corner, his expression a mix of pride and something softer, unspoken. Between takes, Sam encouraged her to share an original song. Skylar hesitated, then sang a piece she'd written in the quiet nights of her pregnancy, "Soul of the River," a blend of gospel and R&B that spoke of finding strength in one's roots. Sam's nod of approval felt like a victory, small but profound. As the session wrapped, Sam turned to Skylar, his tone serious. "This could be big, Skylar. I'm talking about radio streaming and a label deal. But it's up to you. How far do you want to take this?" Skylar's heart raced, the weight of the question pressing against her. "I want to try," she said, her voice firm, despite the uncertainty swirling within. "For my daughter. For me." Joseph smiled, a quiet pride in his eyes. He said, "I'll help, however I can." His voice low, meant just for her. The moment hung between them, fragile and charged, until Sam's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. After Sam and Lisa left, Skylar and Joseph sat on the patio, the jasmine-scented air cooling as dusk settled. "You were incredible," Joseph said, his gaze steady. "I knew you had it in you, but seeing it, it's something else." Skylar blushed, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. "This place, this chance, it's more than I ever expected." Joseph leaned closer, his expression softening. "You deserve it, Skylar. You fought for every step. I want to see you shine." His words were a warmth she hadn't felt in years, but they also stirred a fear. What did this closeness mean? He was her former employer, a man whose world was galaxies apart from hers. Yet his presence felt like home. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Antonio stood there, his face tense, holding a folded paper. "Skylar, you need to see this," he said, handing it to her. It was a letter postmarked from Nashville, the handwriting painfully familiar. Skylar's breath caught as she opened it, her eyes scanning the words from Jake Miller, the man who'd abandoned her when she'd needed him most. "Skylar," the letter read, "I saw your name online, heard about the wedding. Your song's everywhere. I messed up leaving like I did, but I want to make things right. I want to meet our child and be a part of her life. Please, let's talk." Skylar's hands shook the paper, crumpling in her grip. Anger and fear surged through her, memories of Jake's betrayal flooding. "She said he doesn't get to do this," her voice breaking. "Not now, not after everything." Joseph's expression darkened, his protective instinct flaring. He said, "You don't have to respond," his hand hovering near hers, offering comfort without crossing a line. He walked away. "He doesn't get to waltz back in because you're succeeding." Antonio nodded, his jaw tight. "He's just sniffing around because your song's a hit. Don't let him near you or Lily." Skylar's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, her resolve hardening. "I won't," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "Lily deserves better than him." She looked at Joseph, gratitude and something deeper flickering in her gaze. "Thank you, both of you." As Antonio left, promising to keep an eye out for any more letters, Joseph stayed, his presence a quiet anchor. "We'll figure this out," he said. "You're not alone, Skylar." His words were a vow, and for the first time, Skylar believed she could face the shadows of her past. The music, the guest house, the people around her, they were her new foundation. As night fell, she hummed, "Soul of the River." The notes a promise to herself and Lily. No matter what came next, she would rise. The guest house's patio glowed under a string of fairy lights, their soft twinkle casting a warm halo over the jasmine-scented garden. Skylar Perez sat in a wicker chair, her fingers tracing the edge of a notebook filled with lyrics, her belly heavy with the imminent arrival of her daughter Lily. The past weeks had been a whirlwind. Her song by the riverside had climbed to the top 10 on the Billboard charts, its gospel-infused R&B resonating with listeners nationwide. Once a temporary refuge, the guest house had become a sanctuary where Skylar was rebuilding her dreams. Yet the letter from Jake Miller, her ex who'd abandoned her, loomed like a storm cloud, threatening the fragile peace she'd found. Inside the makeshift recording studio, hummed with potential. Sam Jackson, the producer, had left behind a microphone and a set of monitors, encouraging Skylar to refine her new song, "Soul of the River." The song was a love letter to her roots, weaving stories of resilience and faith into its melody. Singing it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself, but the weight of Jake's sudden reappearance made every note feel precarious. She closed her eyes, humming softly, letting the music anchor her against the rising fear. Joseph Clark appeared at the patio door, his silhouette framed by the warm light of the living room. He carried a tray with 2 mugs of chamomile tea, his presence a quiet comfort. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting the tray down and settling into the chair beside her. "You've been working non-stop. How's the new song coming?" Skylar smiled, her heart lifting at his voice. "It's getting there," she said, her fingers tightening around the notebook. "Sam thinks it could be the centerpiece of an album, but it's hard to focus with everything." She didn't need to say Jake's name. Joseph understood, his expression darkening with a protective edge. Joseph said, "You don't have to face him alone," his voice steady but laced with intensity. "I've spoken to a lawyer, Barbara Chen. She's one of the best. She'll ensure Jake doesn't get anywhere near you or Lily, unless you want him to." Skylar's throat tightened, gratitude mingling with a more profound, unspoken feeling. Joseph had become more than a benefactor. He was a constant, a rock in the chaos of her new life. Their late-night talks, his quiet encouragement, and how he listened without judgment, stirred something in her she wasn't ready to name. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Joseph's gaze softened, a flicker of something vulnerable crossing his face. "You'd be fine, Skylar. You're stronger than you realize. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." The words hung between them, charged with a promise neither dared to acknowledge fully. Their moment was shattered by the sharp ring of Skylar's phone. An unknown number flashed on the screen, and her stomach twisted. She hesitated, then answered, her voice cautious. "Hello, Skylar. It's Jake." His voice was smooth, too familiar, cutting through her like a blade. "I know you got my letter. We need to talk about our daughter." Skylar's grip tightened, her heart pounding. "You don't get to call her that," she said, her voice low but fierce. "You left us, Jake. You don't get to show up now because my song's on the radio." "I've changed," Jake insisted, his tone pleading. "I want to be a father. I want to see her. You can't keep me away." His words were a mix of charm and threat, and Skylar felt a surge of anger. "You lost that right when you walked out," she snapped, her voice trembling with emotion. "Please don't call me again. My lawyer will handle this." She hung up her hands, shaking, tears welling in her eyes. Joseph reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft but urgent. "No." Skylar admitted, a tear spilling down her cheek. He thinks he can just come back like nothing happened. He didn't break me. She looked at Joseph, her vulnerability laid bare. What if he tries to take her? He won't, Joseph said, his jaw tight. Barbara will make sure of it. And I'll be right here, Skylar. You're not fighting this alone. His hand lingered on hers, warm and steady, and for a moment, she let herself lean into his strength. The next morning, Sam returned with a small team of musicians, their instruments filling the guest house with a creative buzz. Skylar threw herself into recording Soul of the River, pouring fear and defiance into each note. The song's lyrics spoke of rising above pain, of finding home in one's own heart, and her voice carried a depth that left the musicians in awe. Sam clapped as she finished a take, his eyes gleaming with excitement. This is it, Skylar. This song will strike people and we'll send it to the song. Skylar's heart song will and a Dow of Jake's Cal. We'll send. He glanced at Joseph, who'd stayed to watch his presence, a quiet reassurance. What if I'm not ready for all this? She asked Sam, her voice barely above a whisper. The song, the attention, Jake. Sam leaned forward, his tone earnest. You're ready. Your voice, your story. It's real. People are connecting with it. And as for Jake, let your lawyer handle him. Focus on this. He gestured to the microphone, the symbol of her reclaimed dreams. Joseph walked Skylar to the patio as the session ended, where the evening air was cool and fragrant. You were incredible today, he said, his voice low. I could feel every word you sang. Skylar smiled, her heart lighter, despite the weight of Jake's threat. It felt good, she admitted. Like I'm finding myself again. But I'm scared, Joseph. What if this all falls apart? He stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. It won't. You're building something real. Skylar, not just for you, but for Lily. And I'll be here every step. His words were a vow, and the space between them felt charged, the unspoken feelings growing harder to ignore. Before Skylar could respond, Antonio arrived, his face tense. Skylar, I just heard from a friend at the club. Jake was there asking questions about you. He's not giving up. His words landed like a blow, reigniting Skylar's fear. Joseph's expression hardened. I'll call Barbara tonight. We'll get a restraining order if we have to. He turned to Skylar, his voice softening. You focus on your music. Let me handle this. Skylar nodded, her heart a mix of gratitude and resolve. She thought of Soul of the River and its strength, and felt a fire ignite. Jake could try to pull her back, but she was done being the woman who cowered. With Joseph by her side, and her voice as her weapon, she would fight for her future, for herself, Lily, and the dreams she was finally reclaiming. The Hollywood Bowl stood majestic under the Los Angeles stars, its iconic shell glowing against the night sky, filled with the hum of 17,000 voices. Skylar Perez waited backstage, her breath shallow, her hands trembling as she adjusted the simple silk dress that hugged her now less rounded figure. Lily, her newborn daughter, was safe in Margaret's arms, in a private area nearby, but the weight of this moment pressed against Skylar's chest. Tonight was her first major concert, culminating in months of transformation from a silenced dreamer to an artist on the cusp of stardom. Her songs, By the Riverside and Soul of the River, had captured hearts nationwide, but the shadow of Jake's threats and the pressures of fame loomed large. The backstage area buzzed with crew members adjusting lights and sound equipment. Skylar caught her reflection in a mirror, her eyes wide with fear and resolve. She'd come so far through Vanessa's cruelty, Jake's betrayal, and her doubts, but standing before thousands felt like a void. She whispered a line from Soul of the River, its melody a lifeline. From the roots, I rise, my heart aflame. The words steadied her, reminding her of the strength she'd found in her heritage and journey. Joseph Clark appeared at her side, his presence a quiet anchor. He wore a tailored jacket, his eyes warm with pride. He said, "You're ready for this," his voice cutting through the chaos. "You were born for this stage, Skylar." He held out a small velvet box, his smile tentative. "A good luck charm. Open it after the show." Skylar took the box, her fingers brushing his, a spark passing between them. "Thank you," she whispered, her heart swelling. Joseph had been her rock through the recording sessions, the legal battles with Jake, the whirlwind of her rising fame. Their connection had grown into something undeniable, yet neither had spoken the words that hung between them. She tucked the box into her pocket, her resolve hardening. Tonight, she would sing for Lily herself and the man who'd believed in her when she'd forgotten how. A production assistant signaled, "5 minutes, Miss Perez." Skylar took a deep breath, her nerves a tangled storm. Joseph squeezed her hand gently. "Just be you," he said. "That's more than enough." His words were a balm, and she nodded, stepping toward the stage entrance. The announcer's voice boomed across the bowl. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Skylar Perez." The crowd erupted, a sound wave hitting Skylar like a physical force. She stepped into the spotlight, the sea of faces blurring under the glare. For a moment, panic gripped her, too many eyes, too much expectation. Then she spotted Joseph in the front row, holding Lily, now 3 months old, on his shoulders. Margaret, Antonio, and Sam stood beside him, their smiles a beacon of support. Skylar approached the microphone, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Thank you for being here," she said, the words carrying across the vast amphitheater. "I was cleaning houses a few months ago, wondering how to raise my daughter alone. Tonight I'm here because of her music and people who believed in me." The crowd cheered, their warmth wrapping around her like an embrace. She began with "By the Riverside," her voice rising with soulful power, each note a testament to her journey. The band joined in their instruments, weaving a tapestry of gospel and R&B that filled the bowl. The audience swayed, some singing along. Others visibly moved their faces, reflecting her pain and hope. Skylar felt the music flow through her, unshackling the fears that had once held her back. She transitioned to "Soul of the River," its lyrics a celebration of her roots and resilience, and the crowd's energy surged, their applause a thunderous wave. Between songs, Skylar shared her story, not the scandal of the wedding, but the more profound truth of her life. "I grew up singing in church, learning from my mother that music can heal, can lift you," she said. "This song is for anyone who's ever felt invisible, who's been told they don't belong. Your voice matters." Her words struck a chord, and the crowd roared, their connection to her palpable. As she reached the final notes of "Soul of the River," Skylar's voice soared raw and triumphant, carrying every ounce of her strength. The bowl rose in a standing ovation, thousands of hands clapping, some wiping tears. Skylar stood frozen, overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face. She'd done it, not just survived, but shone. She bowed, her heart full, and caught Joseph's eye, his smile radiant, Lily bouncing happily in his arms. Backstage, the crew swarmed her with congratulations, but Skylar's focus was on Joseph, who approached with Lily now dozing against his shoulder. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew you could do it, but seeing it... Skylar, you're a star." Skylar laughed through her tears, taking Lily into her arms. The baby's warmth grounded her, reminding her why she'd fought so hard. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, her voice trembling. "You saw something in me I'd forgotten." Joseph shook his head, his eyes never leaving hers. "You were always this person, Skylar. I just helped you remember." He paused, then stepped closer, his voice lowering. "There's something I need to say. These past months of being with you and Lily have changed me. I don't want to be your friend, Skylar. I want more if you feel the same. Skylar's breath caught her heart racing. She'd felt it too, the quiet moments, the shared glances, the way he'd become her safe harbor. But fear flickered alongside her longing. Joseph, my life's a mess right now, she said, her voice soft. The music. Jake, Lily. I'm scared to mess this up. I'm not. Joseph said, his hand finding hers. We'll figure it out together. You, me, Lily. We're already a team. His words were a vow, and Skylar felt her walls crumble. She leaned forward, kissing him gently, the moment a quiet promise under the backstage lights. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, a new chapter beginning. Antonio rushed up as they walked toward the dressing room, his face tense. Skylar's security caught Jake trying to sneak backstage. He's gone now, but he was demanding to see you and Lily. Skylar's heart sank, but Joseph's grip on her hand tightened. He won't get near you, Joseph said, his voice firm. Security is on high alert, and Barbara is filing for a restraining order tomorrow. Skylar nodded, her fear tempered by his resolve. Margaret approached, her eyes warm as she took Lily from Skylar. You were magnificent, dear, she said, kissing Skylar's cheek. This is just the beginning. Sam joined them, his grin wide. The label's thrilled. They want an album tour next year. You're going places, Skylar. Skylar looked at her daughter, then at Joseph, her heart full. The road ahead would be challenging, Jake's threats, the pressures of fame balancing motherhood with her career. But she felt ready. With her music, newfound family, and the love blossoming with Joseph, she was no longer the woman hiding in the shadows. As they left the bowl, the stars above seemed brighter, a testament to the light she'd found within herself.